The previous lesson, we saw what happens when you type in a domain name and how you actually get connected to the computer. So your browser essentially is your connection, your window into the internet. And all of your communication is done through the browser. So everything that you want to do on the internet is done through the browser, and it's the server that actually contains that data and has those requested files. So when you do make a request for a file, such as, so I'm on Wikipedia here now, and all of this content is sitting on the server, so the server knows that when I go to this URL, then it needs to return back this content. And that's the same thing for every single page here, that it understands that whenever I type in an address, that it knows the content that it needs to return for that address. So how does all of this work, and how do you actually get to see it within your browser? So every file requires code that runs on the server, and at the end of the day, the server sends back HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that the browser is able to interpret and create all of those interactions and render out that page and have it look the way that it's intended to look. So the whole idea of the internet was that there needed to be a way to be able to develop a file. So even if we had actually the most basic file that we wanted to use, say for instance, I had a document here, so I've opened up Word here, I've created Hello World, and I've got a small welcome. How would we get that to somebody else? So how would we get that to display into somebody else's window? And we need a language, and that language that was selected in order to do this is HTML. So this is an HTML editor here, so I've got Hello World, and I can do something like this where I've got welcome. And this actually gives us the ability to set up the design and structure of that page using HTML. And we can see down here at the bottom there's that code, the HTML code. And this gives us the ability to construct that web page within an editor, and then using our browser we're able to see and render out that code and see it visibly rendered out within that browser. If I go over to that file that I've got on my computer, so I've got, this is where I've got it located, I just called it index.html, we can see that we get this content rendered out, and it gets rendered out. The browser is able to understand what we wanted from it by using those HTML tags and render out the way that we want it to present that content. So how it was initially designed, set up, created, and then broken down and then sent over via the internet, picked up from the browser and re-rendered out to the user. Essentially, the returned content from the server, just like what we saw within the file, gets read by the browser. The browser knows how to interpret that HTML. There's also CSS and JavaScript, and taking all of this together, it knows how to present that content back to the user, reassembling the content correctly by the browser. So in the next lesson, we're going to look deeper into browsers and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code, how it works, and what we can do with it. So it's coming up in the next lesson.